As I said, it's great to be here with so much change in the air. And the change that I think the world has been looking at is unique to our country because we've been able to change a regime, Western style, not only Western style, but American style. Now, we take this for granted, but we have changed our leaders without a military coup, without a roundup of political opponents, and without suppression of the opposition news media. I travel to a lot of places where that remains impossible. And I can tell you that billions and billions of people around the world admire us for that. They just absolutely think it's fantastic. And the vote itself, just the fact that we cast this vote and made a peaceful transition and at least changed, I'm not talking about Bush versus McCain versus Obama, simply that we have moved on, gives the world, from all accounts that I've seen and everything I've known about people who've talked to me about the election, is giving the world a sense of hope. And that, I'll tell you why that's so important. We tend to take the world for granted, I think, based on what I know about my colleagues in this country. We know it's out there, and we know that we're the world's biggest superpower. We know we're still the go-to nation. But I think we don't take into account a lot of the time the fact that the world is so dependent upon us and that we are dependent upon the world. Now, as Thomas Friedman has famously said in the New York Times, the world is now flat. We now know it's flat, that the internet has leveled the playing field. And I alluded a moment ago to the fact that I get up early and read the internet. Well, people in India, people in the Middle East, Asia, everywhere, they are not only reading these newspapers before you wake up, they're in large numbers increasingly doing work for your bosses while you sleep. So, you know, they have an impact upon us. We can no longer think in terms of being self-centered. Now, I have a problem, quite frankly, with my own profession in that regard, the news media. I think we tend to look increasingly inward, and that's understandable at this time because we do have an economic crisis. But I want to talk about how that economic crisis affects everyone in the world. Somebody noted a few moments ago that Europe is feeling the crunch a heck of a lot harder than some of us in America, and that's quite true. Because it's a flat world, we now know that we have these people to deal with out there, and many people around the countries, around the world, they now know it's flat because you don't have to speak English around the world to understand subprime loans and the impact that they've had. They're impacting people who've had nothing to do with our economy, but just try to get on with their lives. And the effect it's having on developing economies is dramatic, absolutely dramatic. Now, in that regard, let me just tell you about an article that Simon Jenkins in the London Times has wrote. He's a pundit in London, a very respected journalist. He says, I'll say the quote, "One U.S. president will belong to domestic America, but the other belongs to the world." Now, Jenkins goes on to point out, the U.S. president must, quote, "represent American values and consequent actions everywhere that is touched by American policy. His decisions benefit or afflict millions of people, rich and poor, in dozens of countries on every continent." Now, let me put it another way. There are 6.6 billion people in the world. We think that there were about 133.3 million people who voted. Now, we've got many people in this room, so somebody raise their hand if I'm wrong, but I make that as the following. Each of us had, know it or not, an unseen, unofficial proxy ballot. We cast our ballots on behalf of 91.5 million other people. For every one of us, we made that decision. Whether you voted for Obama or whether you didn't vote for Obama, you took part in that decision-making process. And that's why I want you to know how important you are as Americans, as individuals, as decision makers, because you drive the agenda. You drive the agenda that drives the man that we've just hired to run the American portfolio. Now, we can no longer dominate the world agenda, but we still are, as I said, the go-to country that can help set the agenda, and people are looking to us to do that. We face a lot of challenges. Barack Obama faces many challenges on many issues. But here's where public opinion around the world will be so important, and has been important throughout the Bush administration, as you well know. Even our Western European allies, much less other leaders that sit on the fence, our friends, our leaders who are friends, they know that if their constituency, if their popular opinion is anti-American or not behind America, they have less discretionary power to get behind us in other decision-making processes. When it comes to the economy, wars, you name it. It makes a difference.